it here and you can write it.
This is forward, this is backward, right? Okay.
So, good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome here today at the European Court of Auditors Sustainability Reporting Forum. Sustainability is very much about the future, so I would like us to start with just two messages from the coming generation. So watch the screen.
My name is Benjamin Weber, and I'm 20 years old. I attend a higher vocational school that focuses on economy and environment in Lower Austria, also known as the HLOB Isperda. Dear politicians, I just want all of you to remember that you're not only politicians. More important,
So, very happy to see you here again. My name is Eva Lindström. I'm the member of the European Court of Auditors, and I'm also the initiator and the host of this event, and I would like to thank everyone for coming here today. I'm really delighted to see that we have such a great international speaker panel, including many experts around the world, and I'm also happy to see very many of my fellow members from the court. I would particularly like to welcome European Commissioner Jyrki Katainen, who will kick this conference off just in a few minutes. We also have an excellent audience, both from the private sector and from the public sector. This is actually the first high-level EU forum on reporting on sustainability and bringing together people both from the private and the public sector. And I think we can say that the time is right for this conference. Sustainability has definitely been among the top concerns of voters in many countries in the European Parliament elections. Climate marches, different movements, and young people also have shown that they care strongly about what we do to our planet. Later this year, we will have a new commission, moving on to the next long-term strategy and decisions on the next long-term budgetary framework for the EU. And this will very much decide the EU's ambition on action on sustainability for the next years. And I think it's important to stress that we don't have much time to waste. It's only 11 years to 2030. A recent UN report has warned that we are eroding the very foundation of our economies, livelihoods, food security, health, and quality of life worldwide. So, what can we do here today at this conference? Actually, I think we can do a lot. The background for this conference is a review on sustainability reporting, which I will present to you later. During the preparation of this review on sustainability reporting in the EU institution and agency, we realized that there are many demands for information on sustainability, both in the private and in the public sector. And there is also a demand for information that one really can trust. So, how to give assurance to this information. In fact, sustainability reporting is nothing new. It has been going on for quite some years, and I think it's fair to say to a large extent this development is driven in the private sector by the need of investors to know what sustainability risk company faces, and of course how these risks are handled. This is because that sustainability risks are financial risk, but also that sustainability possibility is also financial possibilities. And I think that many companies see the opportunities that sustainability brings to their business. And we will hear more about that in a little while. In the public sector, maybe we sometimes take sustainability for granted. I mean, that is the reason why we're here, for the public good. I think it's reasonable also to expect that policymakers, parliamentarians, as well as citizens and voters would like the same kind of information from public organizations and how they affect, but also how they are affected by sustainability issues. A crucial question is how we can trust the information that is being published. Is this the truth? Is it the whole truth? And this is nothing but the truth. We don't just want beautiful PR reports in colors and picture of trees and flowers. So when it comes to financial information, we need to get assurance. And when it comes to performance reporting and non-financial reporting, I think that is also where our auditors come in. To deal with these issues, we have structured this conference in 3 parts. In session 1, we will explore the state of art when it comes to sustainability reporting in the private and in the public sector, and I will also make a very short presentation of our review. In session 2, we will hear from different stakeholders what information they need for their decision and for holding institutions to account. And in session 3, we will explore whether we can trust this information and what the audit profession can do to increase credibility. And we will end the day by looking forward. For me, this is an important day, and I have been quite passionate about the court take forward these issues. And I really hope that we can have an interactive and a lively debate and that we have a truly sustainable conference, so forge networks and take home good practices. I myself will take the outcome of this conference to the high-level political forum on sustainable development, which will take place in New York in around a month. And just some practical issues. Leading us through this packed agenda with her experienced hand is our moderator, Manj Kalar. Please come up. You are a public financial management expert with over 25 years experience in the public sector. Has been head of public sector of ACCA, SIPFA, and various UK government departments. She's an accountant, and I'm very, very glad to have you here today. So, Manj, could you just give us some practical details of the day? How will we go about?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. And welcome to you all coming here on a Monday morning. And thank you for bringing the sun. In the UK, we've really missed it. So without further ado, to make sure we keep on time, most importantly, the facilities. The facilities are outside, upstairs over there. There are 2 sets of facilities upstairs when you came in, to the left and the right, and facilities are over there. Second most important thing, fire alarm. We are not expecting a fire alarm today. If there is a fire, it's the real thing. We need to go out. I've been waiting to do this all my life. As a airline hostess, it's this way, this way, this way. So the door's out to the back. So as you get up, go that way. I never remember my left and right. So to your right, follow all the way around. There will be staff to take you out, and we gather outside the silver building next door. So that's the security detail. And thirdly, sorry for that, I hope it will be an exciting day, but not so exciting that we need a defibrillator, but we do have one on site. And we have first aid facilities upstairs with reception. So if anyone is unwell at any time, please let us know. Us, who are we? We are the organizing team. So if you are stuck, you have any questions during the day, we will be delighted to help you. So dear organizing team, please stand up. Laura, everyone, stand up, please. Wave at everyone. So we need these guys to help. Thank you. So if you have any problems, they will be able to help you. Right. I think, as Eva has said, this is a timely but a really important conference. So let's make some noise. Please use the sustainability reporting hashtag. Let everyone know that you're here today. But let's not make the wrong sort of noise. Please make sure your phones are on silent. So if you can have a quick check. And I will endeavor to do my very best to look after my speakers, to yourselves, and make sure we stick on to time. So part of that, I will very kindly ask you to make sure that you you do come back from coffee breaks and lunch breaks on a timely basis. That will help us to help you to make sure we stay on time. All right, so now, without further ado, I'll hand back to Eva. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vansh. So let me now introduce our first keynote speaker, Jyrki Katainen, Vice President for Jobs, Growth, Investment and Competitiveness, who has been together with First Vice President Timmermans the driving force behind the Commission's sustainability work. So Mr. Katainen, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a pleasure to be part of this very important gathering, looking at how we all could improve our work when providing information where we are when looking at sustainable development. To my knowledge, this is the first conference of this kind focusing exclusively on sustainability reporting. I'm hence even more delighted to be here today to discuss this important topic with you. Let me first greet the member of European Court of Auditors, Ms. Lindström, and her team, also other members of European Court of Auditors who are here present. Today I wish to say a few words about the EU's track record with respect to sustainability. I will also outline the reflection paper we published earlier this year. I think it is fair to say that the EU has a strong starting position and track record. The EU is fully committed to sustainable development. It is part of our DNA. And Europe was a leading force behind the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals and also of the Paris Agreement on climate change. The EU policies, funds and actions cover all SDGs and provide a significant contribution to their implementation. This is the case not only within the EU, but also outside, through our external action plan, which focuses on mostly private investment promotion. Since 2015, when the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted, the Commission has been following the two-step approach towards the implementation of the SDGs. The first work stream is to mainstream SDGs in the European policy framework and Commission priorities. The second work stream is the reflection paper, which I will speak about in a moment. First, regarding mainstreaming, the Juncker Commission has mainstreamed sustainable development into key cross-cutting agendas, but also sectoral policies and initiatives. The Commission has put in place the most ambitious agendas in the world to fully deliver on the SDGs. The examples I will mention all have the specificity that they addresses. At the same time, the economic, social, environmental and governance aspects of sustainability. So, if you want, these are policies of new kind, new generations of policies. To name a few, for instance, Circular Economy Action Plan includes steps for changing consumption and production patterns. It focuses on the design of products, waste management and increasing consumer awareness. The EU plastics strategy and legislation on single-use plastics will protect the environment of plastic pollution while fostering growth and innovations. The action plan on sustainable finance will provide for the first time investors with full information on what is sustainable investment and create a new market for it. The investment plan for Europe boosts investment for Europe's future, for instance, in renewable energy, circular economy, digitalization, innovation, and social partnership, entrepreneurship. And these are just some examples of what the Commission has achieved. The second work stream I would like to mention is the Commission reflection paper towards a sustainable Europe by 2030. It represents a vision for a sustainable European future for the European Union. We published it in January this year together with the first Vice President, Frans Timmermans. The paper forms part of the discussion on the future of Europe. Its aim is to inspire discussion on the political priorities post-2019. It also contains different scenarios which offer ideas to spur the debate and thinking. The reflection paper identifies key policy areas where we need to take further steps towards sustainability. Circular economy, food system, future-proof energy, buildings and mobility, and last but not least, a socially fair transition. Of course, a lot has been achieved already, but further and prolonged efforts are needed. The reflection paper also identifies the key enablers for the sustainability transition. I will not list them all, but let me mention a few that I deem most important. First, we need to invest more in education and training. It is the best investment we can make for our future to ensure equal opportunities and fairer societies. Second, we need to invest more in research, development, innovation and digitization, in particular in artificial intelligence. It has huge potential, for example, in health and agriculture, and Europe cannot lag behind in this field. We should develop human-centric AI. Third is the rule of law and respect of fundamental values. We have recently seen worrying signs of leaders calling for the very foundation of our democracies in the question. About the global dimension of sustainability, while the reflection paper focuses on how Europe can achieve SDGs by 2030, there is an obvious goal dimension to it. Challenges like climate change do not stop at borders. We will continue contributing to the solution together with the rest of the world in multilateral forums and make a positive contribution through development cooperation. Initiatives like external investment plan as well as through open and rules-based trade. So, ladies and gentlemen, the reflection paper with its scenarios should drive citizens, stakeholders, member states, the European Parliament to reflect towards which Europe we want by 2030 and provide the Commission with guidance on the priorities to pursue going forward. The reflection paper is also called to the rest of the world not to get tempted by easy solutions that may solve symptoms in the short term, but do not address the causes of our problems in the medium term. If we wait too long, challenges will only get bigger and we miss out on the opportunities. This brings me to the last point of my intervention, monitoring and reporting. I believe that monitoring the implementation of the 2030 agenda is key. Without knowing where we stand, it is difficult to progress. The Commission supports a robust global monitoring and review process, which will enable us to take stock and adjust our approach as needed. Robust assessment of the EU's progress on the SDGs are provided in several reports. The Eurostat monitoring report on progress towards the SDGs in the EU context is a key tool for facilitating the coordination of SDGs, FCC policies. It promotes the assessment and monitoring of progress in implementing the SDGs, and it helps to highlight the cross-cutting nature and the links among them. In addition, the first joint synthesis report on the implementation of the European Consensus on Development, published last May, show how the EU and its member states are jointly delivering on the UN 2030 agenda through development cooperation and supporting partner countries in pursuing the SDGs. The United Nations High-Level Political Forum in the Central Platform for follow-up and review of the 2020-30 Agenda for Sustainable Development at the global level. The EU reporting will be based on the Commission reflection paper and its annexes in 2019. Eurostat report, the Joint Synthesis report, and the 2019 EU report on policy coherence for development. So, ladies and gentlemen, as a first reflection to the rapid case review, I wish to underline that, of course, the Commission does report and monitor on how the EU policies contribute to sustainable development, and we will continue to do so. However, as also indicated in our reflection paper, it is clear that there is room for further strengthening this aspect. One scenario of the reflection paper, for example, refers to the a specific EU SDG implementation strategy. I look forward to hearing back from you from today's conference and further ideas which the Commission could possibly take forward. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention, and I wish you a very good and fruitful conference. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Commissioner Katainen, for this outlook towards a sustainable Europe. And we will come back to the review. I know you have a very packed agenda and that you leave us now, but we will hear more later from the Commission, and I'm glad that we have such a strong Commission participation here today. So thank you very much. And now to our second key speaker, George Kell, founder and former CEO of the United Nations Global Compact and also chairperson of Arabesque. And from what I heard, you came straight from the Vatican Climate Conference with the Pope. Is that right? So thank you very much for making time today, and welcome up on the stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I was hoping I could speak while walking, but I'll try to stand here. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a great privilege. I left Europe in 1982, before many of you were born, but more recently I come back more often, not least because I do see in Europe really the beacon of hope the beacon of hope for the future, and anything to support Europe and to strengthen it, I think is very timely and important. But today I'm here to share with you my experiences working with the private sector for 3 decades now, and for the last 3 years switching from the corporate world to the world of finance and looking at the same issues more or less from the other lens. And what I want to do with you, I want to share with you my reflections and explain to you why I'm convinced that this agenda is here to stay. It's not a fad, it's something that is very material and very relevant for the future. And that will be my main message. My second message will be that indeed what the Commissioner said is truly true, in a sense that Europe is ahead and leading. But here comes my second message, especially to the institutions of Europe, not to add transaction costs now to a very dynamic and evolving agenda, but to allow for creativity and for entrepreneurship in a true sense. So that will be my second message. And I will not share with you details on reporting, because I know many of you later on will get overviews from people working in that field exclusively. But I want to share with you the bigger picture that is behind reporting and that drives this agenda forward. And just a quick, Arabesque means the beauty of symmetry in nature. It's a London, Frankfurt-based ESG quant fund working exclusively with sustainability and technology, just to make that clear for everybody. Now, stepping back, what has really changed? What is changing in the world? Public and private interests increasingly overlap. And that is really a fundamental, basic understanding, important to realize what's going on. Profit and growth, security, prosperity, due to technology, environmental trends, social trends, and including governance trends, are increasingly bringing the two together. Business has long recognized that, you know, there's a winning spot in there, and that spot is growing. So that's why notions like purpose-driven organizations and so forth are thriving so much, and they're here to stay, because increasingly the private sector is challenged also to deliver on the public agenda, minimize its negative and maximize positive. And this is very fundamental and has been going on for decades now, and will continue to go on in all likelihood. Another fundamental understanding we have to come to grips with, and this is not easy, we are in a new era where we no longer take for granted certain public goods, including quality of air, quality of water, the absolute public goods by definition, historical definitions. We have to learn to find new balances between the market actors and the natural environment. Our valuation system, that is a result of the industrial era history, does not account for this new relationship. Economists talk of externalities and so forth. This is why carbon pricing and related concepts are so important. Truth is, in our current price signal system, the new imperative is not included. Put it bluntly, it still makes financially sense to burn the globe, although we know that brings huge damages and costs. Mark Carney, the governor of Bank of England, talks about the tragedy of the horizon, because the short-term profit is still there, although we know the long-term damage with scientific certainty will hit us. So we have a real dilemma currently in the market system, and that is price signals, not reflecting what we need to do and where we need to go. And this is fundamentally my understanding, because it also reminds us we all are involved there, and we all have to work together. Policymakers, business, citizens, consumers, and finance turning the wheel around. In countries where this transformation is fairly dynamic and well moving on, you will see that these four building blocks are coherently working together. I usually quote two countries, and forgive me for doing so, I quote Costa Rica and Sweden, but I know there are other countries where this kind of inner harmony is still working towards decarbonization, towards a shared purpose. Very important, the alignment of these building blocks. Then, from the business perspective, be aware that this means radical transformation. This is not a small thing. We are moving from the industrial era concept and thinking towards a new future-fit thinking, and that affects all functions of corporate activities, from the strategy down to energy supply, from organizational issues to human resource management, natural resource management, and also policy-society relationships. In the past, the dogma was what corporates used to call compliance optimization. And auditors, by default, often were playing along the same game. The challenge was to comply with the law with the minimum costs necessary and to take some risks here and there. And the offsets are possible punishment versus gains in productivity. That is changing now. In the new forward-looking strategy, the challenge for corporate is to become statesmen, to support smart policies, because realizing that's where the future is going to. It's almost a huge transformation. It's a new era of industrial history that has begun already, but we are just stepping towards it. Now, big data, technology, finance. Finance was fairly late in taking up these issues, quite frankly. When I had the privilege co-launching PRI in 2006 with Kofi Annan, then few paid attention to ESG, environmental social governance factors, as an additional component to assess risks and opportunities towards sustainable development. As a matter of fact, the report which helped to launch PRI was called Who Cares Wins, was commissioned in 2004. And in those days, it excited a few asset owners in the Nordic world who pursued similar thinking of universal ownership called, but then discovered there's a material aspect behind it. Financial crisis came, not much happened. Finance was busy fending off regulation, or what they would call over-regulation. But then a breakthrough happened. Around 2013-14, it was actually arabesque with Oxford University. We came up with the first meta-study that showed there is a positive correlation between high sustainability performance, corporates, and long-term valuation. And that was a breakthrough because it showed the business case for materiality, for sustainable development, for sustainability. The business case is still being challenged here and there, but in the meantime, many more meta-studies have been produced in Asia and elsewhere, which confirm that corporates which embrace these values and issues and which are preparing for a future-fit business model, on average also bring higher returns over time, are less volatile to interruptions, and have the adaptive flexibility to thrive in a new environment. And this chart here, produced by our S-ray technology called Sunshine, it uses every day hundreds of millions of data points to assess corporate performance. It shows a relationship between normative values on the one hand and materiality values on the other hand. And this is very important because this term of materiality, financial relevance of non-traditional financial issues, is increasingly the subject of desire because you want to capture it, you want to quantify it. And sometimes the argument goes, but what about the normative foundational values such as human rights and so forth? And here the good news is the two, of course, go together. And this is very fundamentally important because without a moral orientation about what's right and wrong, to define materiality in the abstract isn't helpful, not really. Then this chart here is one of my favorites because it shows that indeed going back to the year 2007, it shows that companies which are high sustainability performers outperform financially low sustainability performers. And this is what excites the world of finance currently. This is what makes everybody hungry for sustainability information. This makes everybody hungry to understand the dynamic definitions behind the changing context. The tools to assess this are still imperfect, and thanks to the reporting community, which has made important inroads, and I know there will be more about it later, integrated reporting started off initially with GRI, just here next door in Amsterdam, but now covering globally by stock exchanges who increasingly in their listings require sustainability disclosure. This movement is now moving into a new era where big data is helping to assess performance on a dynamic, ongoing sense, as much as the world is watching traditional financial issues. Truth is, it's currently a jungle. There are many, many efforts going on right now, and big investments are being made in getting a better handle on it. The market is finally switching on. It's a very exciting area because it shows that finance now is starting to understand the importance of corporate sustainability. And by relocating then capital away from low to high sustainability performers, transformation is being accelerated from the old industrial era to the future-fit digitalized world. And this is a key role for finance. ESG investing, environmental social governance now, by some estimates, is over $30 trillion. It's huge. It's about 1/3 of global liquid finance going into institutional and other related asset management concepts. It's starting. The frameworks used are still shallow, you can argue, in some respects. And yes, there is some greenwashing here and there, but increasingly the data-driven concept is gaining traction. And I can predict with near certainty that it is a question of time until sustainable finance and corporate responsibility are becoming a major driving force, market-led force. And this is good news because it shows that markets are responding to changing context, and the context is changing. I think I have one final slide, which basically tells the story, and I used just the example of Science-Based Targets Initiative. I could have used almost any other benchmark system. I'm a great fan of TCFD also, the Task Force on Climate Finance Disclosure, chaired by McCartney and Michael Bloomberg, because it has brought this thinking into the world of finance. But this chart basically shows that Europe is indeed leading, far ahead from the rest of the world. European companies are leading on all of these concepts. So my request to you would be, don't forget the rest of the world. Don't isolate Europe from the rest of the world. Don't overdo it, so to speak, in terms of regulatory imposition at this point. Rather allow for flexibility and support the strategic underlying factors that drive business in that way. Finally, a quick reflection. I can't help at the privilege spending just 2 days with Pope Francis and leading CEOs of the energy sector and the world of finance. And the interesting observation is indeed that the European participants were pushing much harder, and there was quite some resistance in other parts of the world. So it confirmed, including on the energy sector, and I don't want to quote companies now, but there's a much greater appetite for moving forward. And 2 important documents came out of that meeting. I would invite you to have a look at them. 2 commitments, one on carbon pricing and one on corporate disclosure to get a better handle on climate risks. And that is quite a breakthrough. That is important because it gives investors now more leeway to challenge companies, to ask, in your governance structure, how well are you taking off these new risks? In your strategy, how are you prepared for the future? Tell us, which kind of targets have you posted? And how is your operational model adapting accordingly? So it's an exciting world. I think the young people rightly remind us that, quite frankly, I think we have failed in the past to pay attention to these issues sufficiently. We still pretend as if business as usual will make the day. No. We have now the tools, we have the understanding, we have the technology, we need the willpower now, and we need this wheel of change, policies, citizens, business, finance, to work together to accelerate the transformation towards a future-fit, sustainable economy, which of course has to be decarbonized. I wish you all the best. I thank you. Anything in my own sense I can do to support European efforts, I would be proudly doing so. All the best.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kall, for this very both inspiring but also reminder that we don't have too much time to spend, but also that there is a lot of things happening in the private sector, and it's happening big, and it's happening right now. So thank you very much, and now I will hand over to Manj for the rest of the day.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. I think, well, I couldn't have said it better. I think Eva, Mr. Katainen, and George have set the agenda really well for the rest of the day. So what we will do is start by hearing from you. I know, I appreciate, it's very hard. We're all, the people up here thinking we've got to know our presentations, but equally, I think it's really hard to sit there and actively listen all day and expect you to be focused. So let's get some energy in the room. We're going to try a survey. Let's hope the technology will work, otherwise I'm sure it'll be my fault. Now, we should get is it Minto? By the way, we have free Wi-Fi. It is an open network, so for those of you for security issues, do check. Okay. So if you could log on to Menti, forgive me, I'm not used to this kind of mic. I'll just project my voice. Menti.com, so it's MENTI.com, and use the code 784641. So we want to know from you, if I get out of the way, does your organization publish a sustainability report, either standalone or integrated? I wanted to have the countdown clock on. I don't get out very often, obviously. Okay, we're at 30 seconds. Right, So everyone voted? Yes? So what do we know? Okay, so 41%, 42. I work in the public sector. Has everyone voted? Yes? So we'll stop now. No, we're not stopping. Right. As it keeps changing, we will refer to these, we will ask questions throughout the day, hopefully keep you engaged, but equally, we will ask our audience, our panelists, our speakers, to make sure that we address the issues. It's great to see that 46% do publish, and they work in the public sector. But that means there are, of course, as maths, a good 57% that don't. Yes, I work in the private sector, 13%. Interesting. More to do. So, okay, while we do that, I'm going to ask our first session to come up. So, what is the current state of sustainability reporting? Please, may I ask our panelists, our first session to come up, Ms. Hilde Blum and Natalia Aguirre-Macquario, and also Sarah Jane Dominic. Do come up. Thank you. So our first panel, take a seat, move out the way. It's okay. And by the way, hello to everybody who's logged in online. We have representatives from Malta, from the UK, from the Netherlands, from Romania. I feel like I'm on Eurovision. Anyway, I'm not quite dressed accordingly, but there we are. So, thank you so much. I'm not saying it's interesting, but we are 4 women on the panel. We will be joined by, but we will have a more gender-balanced panel in a bit when we have the public sector as well. Okay. So what we're going to do, they're going to share their insights onto what the private sector are doing, and then the public sector. What are the global standards? So we have Sarah Jane here for that, on sustainability reporting, and share with you some best practice examples, starting with the private sector, and hence we've asked Natalia here from UMCOR. Right, so starting with Hilde, I'd like to formally invite her to speak. She's the Deputy CEO for Accountancy Europe. You previously known as FEE. I know it as FEE, and I had to look up what FEE stood for. FEE, I found out on a discussion paper, was the Fédération des Experts Comptables Européens. There was a discussion paper, you'll be surprised to note, providing assurance on sustainability reporting dated 2002. So we've been talking about this for a long time. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Hilde. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very grateful to be here this morning, and many thanks to Ms. Lindström for the invitation and also for the initiative from the European Court of Auditors to actually talk about sustainability, but also to work on it and to make it be a next topic also in the public sector and to do the awareness raising. I would like to just say a few more words on Accounts Europe. We actually, at Accounts Europe, we represent on European level accountants, auditors, and also advisors. And when we, as it was pointed out, when we look at what we have done in the 33 years that we exist, indeed, sustainability reporting, sustainability measurement, and sustainability assurance has been one of the subject matters on which we have worked for a very long time. We felt a little bit alone in the past, but now it has really become much more mainstream, I would say, and that's only something that we would actually fully support. Now, where are we on sustainable reporting? And for us, when we look at the European level, the main initiative has really been the Non-Financial Information Directive that I'm sure most of you in the room here know, because it's the first time that we saw a legislative European initiative to actually have at least certain parts of companies, because I'm talking mainly about the private sector, do ESG reporting, environmentally, socially, and governance reporting. But obviously it's a directive, it's minimum requirements, there is a lot of flexibility for member states how this could be adopted, and we will see in a moment on a few visuals that that is also what happened. But it also means that there are 7,400 companies that have already done such a reporting, actually for at least 2 years. This directive was supposed to be implemented at the end of 2016, but it took a bit longer in a number of countries. So we have had 2017 and 2018, where we had, for those companies that fall under the directive, reporting on ESG matters and sustainability. And if we just look at what is the scope of that directive, and if we look at the map of Europe, for those companies that fall in the scope, which are large listed public entities with more than 500 employees, they have as a minimum to report on environmental, social and employee-related matters, anti-corruption and bribery matters, and also human rights. We see indeed there is some flexibility. And we thought it was interesting to look at where do we see just minimum requirements that are applied, and that's basically the dark ones, the 11 black ones on the screen. So there we have the minimum that is applied, but in the red countries we see that actually they have gone further and they have extended the scope of companies that had to report under that directive. And when we look at a few countries, for instance, in Denmark, we see they thought threshold of 500 employees too high, so they actually halved it to 250. Greece did the same. France did the same. And in France, for instance, they said, well, this is not only about listed entities, this is about also larger entities, and all entities that have a turnover of more than 100 million euros, we believe they have to do such reporting. So when we look ahead, where are we now and where we believe we would be going, we strongly see that there is a real scope for other larger entities, not just listed entities, to really be within the scope, and that's what we think we will see happening in the future, and that's a development that we would very much support. Now, when we talk about reporting, then we have to look how is this disclosure, how is this transparency, which is in the title of this conference, how is this actually done? And again, this directive has a minimum level of disclosure, of way of disclosure that they are informing about. And companies can do those disclosures in the management report, which about a third of the countries are doing. That's the red ones. And there are other ways of reporting as well, which is maybe less demanding. And there can be just a separate report, so it's not integrated with the main reporting. It can just be a separate sustainability or ESG report published together with the management report. Or it can also be actually not at the same time, much later, but in the first 6 months after the reporting deadline, that it is somewhere on a web link. And so timeliness is playing a role. We believe the more timely, the better it would be. And also the way in which it is reported, if it is with the main reporting, we believe that that is a huge way forward. Now, the frameworks, the benchmark to report, that's completely free, and you see a lot of different frameworks. You will have somebody talking about GRI, that's the most popular one, but there are many others, hundreds of frameworks used, and we really believe it would be good that there is a cooperation, coordination, and maybe consolidation of frameworks, that, you know, there is more good quality frameworks that are used by companies. And last but not least, you know, we are at the conference of the European Court of Auditors, so we think we have to talk about assurance. There is not a lot of requirement there. Most countries actually have done the absolute minimum, the red ones. It's just making sure, from the auditor's point of view, that the reporting exists. Nothing more, nothing less. In some countries, in the ones which are black, it's a consistency check between the overall reporting and the sustainability reporting, which doesn't say anything about the quality of the reporting. And in other countries, just 3 for the moment, France, Spain and Italy, they have actually decided that they want to do more and they want real assurance by an auditor on also the data, the quality of the reporting. So that's again a trend that we see coming up, that there is more demand for assurance and that some countries have decided to already go that way. So we as an audit and assurance profession, we invest into this. We're very grateful for the international standard setters to also work on this. And we believe that, again, that would be the way forward, that there's more trust, more assurance given on that reporting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hilda. That was great. Really good. I always love to see charts because I always think it's much easier to see the... I'm not quite sure what's happening there. So, you recorded. So I can hear you twice. It was so good, we're playing it twice. So we're having a few technical issues. While we do that, we're all human, so please bear with us. It would be unfair to introduce Natalia until we've got our sound fixed. Okay, I think we're there. Are we ready to go? Oh no, now you're going to hear me. Okay, we're good to go. Thank you. That's a lesson for me to keep quiet. Next is Natalia Guerras-Maquerio. My apologies if I've mispronounced your name. She's the Integrated Reporting Manager at Umicore and you can correct me if I'm pronouncing that wrong too. And in her first year, she won the award for the Best Belgium Sustainability Report in 2017, with title Best Impact Sustainability Report in the category of the large organizations. Now, without further delay, I'll hand over to Natalia, and she can show us what they've done and how they've managed to achieve those accolades. Over to you.
Thank you. Now, thank you for inviting Umicore to be part of this conversation today. We're thrilled to be able to share our experience. I know we're short on time, and we want to live as much as possible for the discussion, so I will try to come to the heart of the matter as quickly as possible. Of course, before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about Umicore if you don't know us. We're a global materials technology company, and we focus strategically on 2 specific activities. One is clean mobility materials, and the other is recycling. We have what we consider to be a unique business model where we not only offer products, but also the services to take back those products and recycle them from our clients, in addition to being able to recycle some of the most complex waste streams and extracting metals and turning them into resources again. We're supported by some global megatrends, including the focus on the SDGs, having to do with a need for increased resource efficiency, a demand for clean air, and vehicle electrification. And Umicore delivers on all 3 of those things and is supported by those megatrends. Our current strategy is Horizon 2020. It was delivered in 2015 and runs through the end of next year. 2 pillars there again, and this is clear leadership in clean mobility materials and recycling, and also turning sustainability into a competitive edge, which is the most challenging of the 2 strategic objectives, because while we have sustainability in our DNA and a long history of sustainable business practices, turning that into something beyond a reputational advantage, say, into real business sense, is really something that we're working on actively with our partners and internally. Now, we do this in a number of ways: our products and services, the highest standards of, and certificates in terms of business operations, but really disclosure is key in talking to our stakeholders, our public, about what it is that we're doing and how beyond our financial performance is really important. Now, why do we do this? Well, it wasn't always the case. So Umicore has been reporting on sustainable activity, on its sustainability activity since 2005. But today, I mean, we and others like us report because we have to, right? We're legally obliged as publicly listed companies. But for us, this provides an opportunity to talk about what it is that we're working on. There's something missing here. Ah, there we go. An opportunity to talk about what we're doing and how we achieve our success, because we employ an integrated reporting model. So we report our financial and non-financial, or some call it pre-financial data, together in one report, because we feel that this offers a real view of how a company has more than just its financial performance in terms of significance of valuing the company. Everything from, yes, financial performance, but product design, how we treat our employees, our environmental impact, and the fact that these are indicators of how a company can truly deliver value to our stakeholders and to sort of internally and externally are really key. I think that I'm really here to talk about our challenges. And so that's what I'm really going to focus on today. We have a number of challenges in reporting. We've mentioned frameworks here earlier on. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that that's a challenge for companies in picking which framework to report on, the one that speaks to the most stakeholders, the one that is most likely to be adopted widely by industry and used by local authorities as being the framework to report on. So we report on using the GRI core option, but there are others, and TCFD has been mentioned today, and SBTI for goal setting, et cetera. And all of these are now sort of, we see them converging, and we're still waiting, including for the Sustainable Development Goals, on ways to really measure impact that everyone can use, right? We only want one thing, is for everyone to sort of get together and decide, this is how we want companies to talk about their activity, this is how we want them to measure impact. And so that we can just say, okay, got it, we'll do that. So that's the first big challenge. The second big challenge, as I see it, is accessibility. And while there is the issue of paper reporting versus web reporting, which is a challenge in and of itself as we're transitioning increasingly to digital reporting. And many of you know that producing a report for print and producing a report for web are entirely different things. How you structure content, the interactivity, the length, the accessibility of those things are important. I don't necessarily mean that when I mean accessibility. What I'm really talking about is readability, right? So my colleagues, my clients, auditors, legislators need to all come to one document looking for information and come away with the information that they were looking for, coming from different backgrounds, different kinds of understanding, and different interests. One document needs to serve all of our stakeholders at once. And this is a challenge for a company to deliver, beyond facts and figures, real qualitative data that our stakeholders can understand. So readability is an issue. In addition to that, really? 1 minute? Okay. In addition to that, there's the issue of length, conciseness. A real integrated report can't be 300 pages, or else it's just a long list of stuff you've done in the last year, and no one's really going to want to read it unless you're an analyst and absolutely have to. And beyond that, there's the question of credibility. So we've talked about assurance. Umicore uses third-party assurance beyond just saying that it exists, despite the fact that we're established in Belgium, and apparently that's the minimum legal requirement. Auditors come in and verify our financial and non-financial information as being true. But beyond auditors, there's also a challenge for companies to expose their vulnerabilities, to talk about more than just their successes. As this is a major communication tool for companies to reach out to all of our stakeholders at once, the issue is really going beyond the good news show, so that those who come and talk to you or come and read your report know that what they read is in fact a true reflection of your activity as a company. So this puts us in the vulnerable position of talking about the things that we haven't quite sort of solved yet. And I will leave it at that, so as not get in trouble with the moderators. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Natalia, and a huge thanks for trying to fit in a lot. I'm sure I and the audience will pick up on pick your brains as to how you've done it in the questions and answers coming up in a minute. Now, just one immediate reflection, I would say, with your, yes, there's lots of frameworks, and I think that really neatly leads into my next guest. We have Sarah Jane Dominic from the Global Reporting Initiative, based in the Netherlands. Thank you for getting the early train. I'm sure some of you as well have to be here today. To get here, she leads a team of and groups of technical experts to develop the standards. If you want to check. And as she is a fellow accountant, ICAS, I will leave you in her capable hands.
All right. Thank you, Manj. I feel quite honoured today to present a European Court of Auditors Sustainability Reporting Forum. I feel it's a safe place for me to say I'm proud to be a chartered accountant and a former auditor. So there you go. It's not something I profess to every day. Okay, so I wanted to take you through an introduction. What is the Global Reporting Initiative, the GRI standards, but some key data on how prolific the use of our framework and standards are. So what is sustainability reporting? I'm sure it's already been covered, but from GRI's perspective, we believe it is the practice of disclosing sustainability information inspires accountability, which I'm sure there's a number of accountants in the room, so it's that accountability, responsibility, helps identify and manage risks, so it should be closely aligned to an organization's strategy, risk management assessment and process, and it enables organizations to seize new opportunities, and I think that's very important. It isn't just a compliance tick-the-box exercise, it really is something that you can use to leverage and identify new opportunities for your organization, be you a public or private sector body. So reporting supports companies to protect the environment and improve society, thrive economically by improving governance and stakeholder relations, enhancing reputation and building trust. And those two words are very key, I think, in an assurance and auditing accounting arena as well. All right, some very quick statistics. So, what are the global adoption rates of GRI? This is based on the KPMG survey that comes out every 2 years, where they do a holistic, comprehensive review of sustainability reporting around the globe. And if we look at the G250, the largest 250 companies in the world by revenue, we can see that 93% disclose some form of ESG information, but 75% of them are very proud to say, use the Global Reporting Initiative to do that. And then a similar scenario, but the statistics are a bit lower, as you'd expect once you come down from the G250. So when we look at the N100, the largest 100 companies by revenue in 49 countries, 75%, so still an overwhelming majority, report some form of ESG information, and then almost 2/3 use the GRI standards to do so. And then I think it's very interesting then to look at how we are referenced across the world when it comes to policy. So this can be capital market regulation, this can be government policies, so stock exchange listing rules, and this gives you an indication that 125 policies, GRI standards, are referenced into across 60 countries and regions. So We'd like it to be more, obviously. But I think that's a very good global coverage, covering all the continents and in varying ways. And we have seen where it has been leveraged into regulations, etc. It has certainly increased the rate of sustainability reporting and the quality of that reporting. Okay, enough of the statistics. So I think it's useful to have a look at the evolving corporate reporting landscape. So it's a bit of an alphabet soup of acronyms there. But we have endeavored to list us and others who are in the sustainability reporting arena to position us and explain. Obviously, we have two major financial reporting standard setters, and then we have an overwhelming number of players in the ESG arena. Now, some of us look at integrating non-financial information into financial information. Some of us are purely focused more on the non-financial information, but I think that's just a helpful slide to show the major players. Now, that is not by any means all of them, but I would say they're probably the most well-known. And the other point to point out is, and I'm sure it will be discussed later in an afternoon session, we all participate in something called the Corporate Reporting Dialogue that was convened to improve alignment and harmonization amongst us. And it's already been mentioned this morning, there are a lot of framework standards to select from, and it's quite overwhelming to work out which one would best suit your needs and best address your stakeholders' needs. And then where do we fit in? So those of us on the previous screen, we are setting standards and frameworks for others to adopt. There are an overwhelming number of organizations who then issue reports based upon those frameworks and standards. We then encourage the provision of assurance, and GRI does strongly recommend that reports are assured, because then the data can be used with reliability, credibility by data aggregators, analysts and ratings, data consumers. So ultimately, this is looking at the external benefit of doing reporting. Okay, so what are the GRI standards? Very quickly cover this. So they are a set of interrelated reporting standards that enable organizations to report on their economic, environmental, and social impacts. We have modularized them so that we can update specific topics as and when it becomes appropriate to do so. At the moment, we are revising what we call our universal standards. We are revising our waste standard. We are developing a new standard on tax and payments to government, which is something that doesn't exist outside of the financial reporting arena. So we're really quite proud of that. And then finally, what's the impact of all of this? Well, we would see that reporting is a means to an end. The end is not the reporting. The reporting is a vehicle by which an organization can have that information to make appropriate decisions, but also stakeholders, including investors, can use it to make decisions too. Using the GRI standards provides transparency across a whole range of topics. It's also an enabler for SDG reporting, and we have a number of publications on our website that show how you can incorporate GRI standards and assist you in reporting on SDGs. And finally, it can be used by any type of organization, and we are working with SMEs. It's not just the large corporates that are now using the GRI standards, and it is appropriate for private and public sector too. I'm out of time, so thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Am I on? Yes. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate everybody stuck to time. Before you're thinking, well, the private sector and the public sector, indulge me a little bit. I just want to ask one question before we ask our representatives from the public sector to join us. So don't leave when they join, so that we can then have a conversation between the public sector and private sector. So my moderator's prerogative. We have so many standards. What's to stop me picking and choosing the one that suits me the most? Now, when I say suits me, it could be well, I don't want to use the word greenwashing, but you see what I mean. I want to, obviously, I think of company financial statements or sustainability reporting, any message that I put out there, I want everyone to see the best side of me. I would say, take this side picture, because this is my best side. How do we avoid that? I'm going to start with Hilda first.
Well, for the moment, there is nothing that stops this except for a company wanting to do a good job in their reporting. And I think most of the companies really want to do this. But you see at times in reports very obscure standards that are used for a certain part of the reporting. And that's why we think that would be good, and I think that's the tenure here this morning, that there would be more consolidation within the different frameworks, because there is no need for all those very specific ones that give a certain light which might not be the one that you would like to give if you really want to give a true and fair picture overall of your ESG or sustainability reporting.
Thank you. So, yes. As we're saying, we're talking about trust and transparency. Natalia.
I think stakeholders have a huge role to play in this. If you have any kind of stakeholder engagement and you're listening to them, they will tell you how they want you to report. The question is, if you have to split the difference of who's asking most for what, and the cost in terms of effort for a company to deliver against everything that stakeholders are asking for in terms of reporting, but really that direction comes from a company's stakeholders, if they're listening.
Excellent, thank you. And obviously, the standard setter.
Yeah, now I'm going to try and be as neutral as possible, but there is no reason why organizations can't use a combination. So, as I listed, some of the standard setters, they are frameworks. They tell you how to do your reporting. Some of them very much focus on specific metrics. So it is certainly possible to integrate some of those. So you can do the CDP questionnaire. You could also do a GRI report. And I think I would echo what Natalia said. It very much is what best serves your purpose. And the GRI is very much looking at the impact of the organization. Others look at the impact on the organization. So that may be a key differentiating point as to what your stakeholders expect you to report.
Excellent, thank you. I can think up so many follow-up questions, but it's not just me. We want to hear from yourselves. You will have your turn, but first we will invite Eva to speak from and highlight and showcase the report that was published last week. I think there are lots of interesting takeaways for us in terms of setting the scene in terms of what's happening in the public sector. I would also be delighted if Mr. Koopman would like to come up and take his place. And Heidi, please, if you, sorry, oh, forgive me. And if Nicola could join us too. Sorry, not Heidi, sorry, yeah, later. My mistake, sorry, thank you. Sorry, it's my getting confused.
Okay, thank you very much. And I've been listening, very interesting to hear this discussion about the standards and that one size might not fit all, but I think, of course, the auditors have an extremely role to play when it comes also to scrutinize, is this material and from what aspect is this material? So that is the question we will come back to. So I'm going to present the review, which was, of course, an important background for this conference. It's called Reporting on Sustainability, a Stocktake of EU Institutions and Agencies. As you might know, the Court of Auditors, we've done several reports related to climate, related to energy, related to agriculture, but I think this is the first court product where we take a sort of a broader perspective in relation to the SDGs and the Agenda 2030. And I think there are three main reasons why they decided to do this review. I think it's clear, and also Commissioner Katainen underlined that the The EU, the Commission, and the EU member states, they are fully committed to implement the SDGs, and also both the Council and the European Parliament has called for the Commission to report to the United Nations on the internal and external implementation of the Agenda 2030. Secondly, as we heard, 2018 was the first year in which large public interest entities were obliged to publish sustainability. So I think it's reasonable to ask the question, is EU leading by example? And thirdly, we know it's 11 years left to 2030, rapidly approaching, and I think we all recognize that more is to be done, and sustainability reporting can help to turn commitment into accounts. So just let me start with our main review question. What is the status of reporting on the achievement on the SDG at EU level and sustainability reporting by individual institutions and agencies within the EU? First of all, I think it's important that I also say that this is a review. It's not a sort of a formal, a profit audit. In a review, we have a possibility to describe the development, but also to highlight some issues. And I will also end this presentation with talk about the challenges for the future. So, of course, we did document analysis. We looked into the annual reports. We did a lot of interviews, but we also did a survey which to 12 EU institutions and 41 agencies, and we got a response rate of 100%. So, sustainability reporting, there has already been quite a lot of discussion what this is. And to put it very shortly, there's reporting on economic, environmental, and social impact. And for me, I think it's important to stress that it's not a sort of a product, it's a process. And when we have done this review, of course, we have looked at the reporting, but to be able to do a report, you also have to have a process. You have to have a strategy, you have to done the analysis, you have to decide on which goals are the most important, you have to set targets, and of course, you have to follow up. And also, I think it's important to say that sustainability reporting is used both for decision-making, but also for making the organization, the company, or even the government accountable to its stakeholders. As I said, to report on a progress, you need to be clear to what to report against and what targets are to be achieved. So the first sort of conclusion, and that was also mentioned by Commissioner Katainen, today there is no overall EU strategy that covers the SDGs up to 2030. There are, as you probably know, different strategies. We have the strategy from the Juncker Commission. Of course, we have also the 2020 strategy. We have the multi-annual financial framework, and we have ongoing discussion, negotiation right now for the next multi-annual financial framework, but there is no sort of strategy in place after 2020 to cover the Agenda 2030. So one can say, mind the gap, and of course this is something that the upcoming Commission will have to discuss, decide on, and also how to take the SDGs on board. Commissioner Katainen mentioned the Commission's reflection paper, and I think this is a very interesting document. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. 3 scenarios for a sustainable Europe is described, but I also think it's fair to sort of underline that this is not a strategy, and it's not a sustainability reporting. And in this reflection paper, there's no analysis that could identify what more needs to be done. It's more of a discussion paper for the next Commission coming up. When we talked to the Commission, they also referred to the Eurostat report, and this is also a very important and interesting document. It's a description of SDG-related information, largely based on statistical data from the member state. I think one can say that this is a general development, what is happening in the different member states in relation to sustainability and also in relation to the SDG. But it is not and could not be a measure of contribution. What does the EU budget, what does the EU legislation, what does the EU policy achieve in relation to the SDGs? As I said, the EU is firmly committed to the SDG and to sustainability, so these are part of the goals. All member states agree on this, so one would expect reporting on this. Of course, the Commission does a lot of performance reporting, and I think the standard is quite high, and that has also been recognized by, for example, OECD. But it's not reporting on the contribution of the EU budget and the EU policy to achieving the SDGs, with one exception, and that is performance reporting in external action, and that is very much about development aid. Perhaps this mirrors the situation that we have in some member states where the Ministry of Foreign Affairs leads the coordination when it comes to the work on the SDGs and also the reporting of the SDGs. And this could be a little bit of an indication that in some countries, maybe the sustainability goals are still seen as something for countries sort of far, far away and not something that really addresses all countries. And that is also a new feature of the EU or the United Nations goals, also in relation to the old Millennium Goals. So, concluding on what the Commission has done, there is still a lack of strategy. It has published a reflection paper. There is an interesting Eurostat report on the development in the member states country, but apart from one area, SDGs implementation has not been integrated into the Commission's performance reporting. When it comes to individual reporting and the 12 institutions and the 41 agencies, we note that 2 EU bodies has published sustainability reports. It's the European Investment Bank, and we will hear more about that in a little while, and also the European Intellectual Property Office. Having said that, it's important to be aware of that there's a lot of information that is being prepared, gathered, and also published within different institutions and agencies, but it's incomplete and it's piecemeal, and it's very much focused on the sort of the internal running of the organization. That is, how much water do we use, how much paper do we use, but not in a sort of a more strategic way where the agencies or the institutions put their core business into the sustainability framework. And of course, this also means that there's a risk that important issues are not being covered. We asked the institutions and the agencies why they didn't publish, and some say we don't have the necessary know-how, some said we don't have the indicators available, and some said, of course, this will create too much work for us. But I think the main answer was, we haven't considered it yet. And I was a little bit surprised to see that 43% of you who come from public institutions actually have done a sustainability report. I think that is very positive, but of course, as an auditor, you always ask, is this really true? So maybe that is something that we could keep on discussion. But I think when it comes to the EU institution and the EU agencies, they are, to start with, a matter of raising the awareness to be able to do this. So for the future, we point at 4 major challenges. I think, as I said, it's very important that we have an EU strategy post-2020 that covers sustainability, that covers the SDGs, and that is, of course, something for the upcoming and incoming new Commission to work with. Also, to be able to report, you need to integrate sustainability and the SDGs into the EU budget and into the performance framework. And also on the level of institutions and agencies to develop the ability to report, and also to increase the credibility of sustainability report through audit. We have talked about greenwashing. We have talked about the important that the sustainability reports are not just PR reports, but they are really interesting for the stakeholders. And one final remark from this review, I think when it comes to the institution and the agencies, there's still a lack of awareness, and I do hope that this conference also can be helpful on this. So, thank you very much for your attention, and I will stop there.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Eva. That's brilliant.
Hello.
Clearly, there are a number of challenges. They were on the screen a second ago, and we will ask more questions about that in a moment. So I am delighted to share, well, as one of the companies or the organizations mentioned in the report, who better to tell us what they do and share how they manage to share best practice in the public sector than the European Investment Bank as one of the exemplars. Please welcome Mr. Nicola Pochettino, who will be delivering this session. A special thanks to Mr. Pochettino. He's had so many things, and this was something that landed on his desk very late last week. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the European Court of Auditors for inviting the EIB. Indeed, this is a very long presentation. There are many slides, but don't worry, I'm going very fast. And as Hans Christian Andersen said once to his friends, dear friends, I'm writing to you a very long letter because I don't have time. So that's why I am going to be very fast. Oops, I already did something wrong. Sorry. So the European Investment Bank is the Bank of the European Union. We are owned by the member states of the EU, and we are also the largest multilateral financial institution in the world and one of the biggest lenders of climate finance. We work on the basis of 4 public policy goals, as we call them, 4 objectives, which are innovation, environment, infrastructure, and SMEs. But we also have cross-cutting objectives, and I would like to show you here one of the most relevant for our discussion, which is climate action. Last year, about 30% of our lending went to projects that had as an objective the one of bringing Europe and the world more aligned with the Paris Agreement and reduce the growth in carbon emissions so that temperatures go towards a maximum raise of 2 degrees Celsius. Now we are looking at 1.5 degrees Celsius. But what I showed was about money. Now there's more behind that. And actually what we want to do is to deliver impact. We're not just looking at volumes. We are looking at what we can do to improve the life of people. And this goes from creating jobs to improving to give access to safe drinking water or to improve health services or to install renewable energy. Now, as you can well imagine, it was just mentioned, we are proud of illustrating all what we do in our sustainability report, because sustainability underpins all our activity. But how do we do that? What is in this report, and what are we reporting? So we start from the projects, because the bank, as I said, is a large borrower, the largest in the world, and we are transferring benefits in terms of lower interest rate to projects. And these projects need to be sustainable and sound. And to do that, we have a very, if you want, heavy project cycle that allows us to screen out or screen in the projects according to their soundness. One important aspect here, I want to signal it immediately, is the economic assessment of the project. We want to make sure that we invest only in projects that improve the social benefit. We also streamline climate action in everything we do. We consider carbon footprint for all our projects. We add carbon pricing or economic cost of greenhouse gas emissions to the projects. We have also issued, and we were the first in this sense, an emission performance standards to curb investment in technologies that emit carbon beyond a certain level. We also integrate environmental and social standards in all our aspects, and we transfer this knowledge to our client. And we don't stop there. We have also developed a strategy for gender. We are sensibilizing our staff to appraise projects in areas of conflict. And of course, we are reviewing constantly our climate strategy. So with this basis of projects, with the fact that we only finance sustainable projects, it came to mind years ago in 2007, if I'm not wrong, the idea that we can bring these messages to the borrowers. We've seen that there's a lot of appetite for, there was a lot of appetite, still even growing now, in green bonds. So we inaugurated de facto. We were the first to issue green bonds in 2007 with the idea of offering to investors a type of product that was associated with the climate project. De facto, what is a climate awareness bond, as we used to call it, is a bond that whose underlying projects are climate related. They are either renewable energy projects or energy efficiency projects. But we didn't stop there. Last year in September, we issued the first sustainability awareness bond, because what we did in practice is to extend the area of sustainability from pure climate, this was the climate awareness bond, to other environmental areas such as water, like water sanitation, flood protection, and social, health and education. Examples of our sustainability include also what was mentioned before by the Commissioner Katainen, circular economy, but also blue economy like Clean Ocean. And of course, we've been reporting on sustainability development goals with all the limitation that these had at the beginning, and if there are questions, I can also explain it. We have been reporting and associating our activities with those indicators. And we cannot do this if de facto we are not transparent. So we have a solid transparency policy that imposed to us to disclose publicly as many documents as possible. Why do I say that? Because you can understand that there are, I mean, being a bank, we treat with both the public and the private sector, and there are private activities with certain information that is confidential and cannot be disclosed. But for example, all environmental and social aspects of the project are publicly disclosed proactively. And we want to make this available to all stakeholders, maintaining a dialogue, a constant dialogue with civil society and with the non-governmental organizations, which we meet twice a year. So with this, I would like to conclude. I think, again, I will be happy to join the conversation later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicola. I was a bit worried when I saw all of the whizzy slides. I thought, gosh, it's going to take, but that's why you're the expert. Right, and that's why you're invited to the stage. Last but not least, I'm honored to present Mr. Gert van Koopman, Director General for the Budget for the European Commission. Taking up the top position in August 2018, he leads the EU's financial programming, annual budgets, accounting and financial role. So you can understand why it's interesting that we've had the conversation and the findings from Eva. So we'll be delighted to hear from Mr. Gert van Koopman. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Eva, for inviting me. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's a very timely conference from the perspective of the European Commission, as Vice President Katainen also explains, because we're at a critical juncture with the start in this autumn of a new Commission, a new cycle. So a debate about sustainability is very timely indeed. And I also find that it is very useful to have the review which was presented by Eva just a minute at this point in time. I think the review also shows just how challenging and complex the issue is. It is, by definition, an extremely multifaceted concept, sustainability. And I believe that you've pulled together a lot of important existing information that sketches where we stand today and highlighted a number of possible new elements which I believe we need to look at carefully. I would say that, sustainability reporting in the private sector is one thing, and it relates to the activities of a company in the way that's been explained in the first panel. Sustainability reporting by the EIB, which we've just listened to, is about projects. Sustainability reporting by a government or the European Commission as an executive is another thing, because it would encompass not just projects, of which we actually do relatively few, but in essence all of our policies, many of which are actually delivered through member states. So the complexity at this level is rather daunting indeed. I would also say there are a number of institutional points which we need to take into account as we approach sustainability reporting, because one of Eva's findings is that there is no strategy for 2013 on sustainability, on reaching the SDGs. And I think it's worth going back to the start of this particular cycle, the cycle that's now coming to an end, where both the European Council, which actually sets the priorities of the Union, and the Commission laid down a work program and a strategy that was considered to be consistent with the SDGs. So the way we look at this is that the SDGs are mainstreamed, internalized, and that the work programs that come out of the European Council and the Commission, the strategic agenda that's being elaborated again today, and that will be hopefully adopted on Thursday and Friday at the European Council, they set the direction of travel for a 5-year period, and they need obviously to fully integrate the SDGs, and that's what we're trying to do. But, and I also have to be clear about that, the SDGs are not the Union strategic agenda, because a lot of the issues that are pertinent to SDGs actually fall outside of the scope of our field of responsibility and action. So we contribute to the SDGs, but the SDGs are not the Commission's work program. And I think it's important to make this possibly somewhat institutional point, because it relates then to how we track and trace and report on what the Commission does and what the Union achieves. And I think, therefore, I would say that the present situation is a fair reflection of this institutional reality. On the one hand, Eurostat reports on progress towards the SDGs across the piece. This is very clearly, as the report also highlights, not a fully fledged, genuine sustainability report, but it is a mapping of whether the Union is on track to reach the 100 indicators that underpin the SDG. When it comes to our policies and budget, we report in a performance framework on the specific objectives and the indicators and targets set for our programs. Now, these, of course, are consistent with the SDGs, and actually they've been developed to ensure this. So I would believe that through the reporting on our PPOs, we make a contribution to sustainability reporting going forward. And I think that is an important insight. Now, it is true, of course, that if you read our PPOs, and we've just published them, you could ask the question very legitimately how this all adds up. So how the Union's action through the programs in the budget adds up to reaching the SDGs. And I believe personally that, as the report also points out, there is scope for further improving the readability, which will also help in terms of accountability going forward by pulling this together and putting it more clearly in the context of the SDGs. So whilst we believe that the SDGs are built into our current performance and reporting framework, and that we should not try, for the institutional reasons that I have mentioned, to replace this by a separate reporting framework on SDGs, I do believe that within this framework there is definitely scope for improving and elaborating further the specific actions the Union undertakes with a view to reaching the SDGs. Now, I've talked a lot about the budget because that's my core responsibility, and there obviously we have more scope for making such progress. But I would also like to be clear that in a number of areas, the budget, of course, is predominantly executed by member states. So in fact, 75% of expenditure is carried out by member states, which means that if we want to take this really seriously, we need to have a very serious conversation, not just in the House with the European institutions, but also with the member states. So that's an important an important avenue for further work. Secondly, a lot of our policies are of a regulatory nature and, if you will, of an advisory nature. Think about the European semester, where the execution to a large extent takes place at member states level. And there I honestly believe that it is going to be very challenging to try to work out exactly, in a quantitative sense, how a recommendation in the euro area, recommendation under the European semester actually influences and impacts on quantitatively the 17 SDGs. I don't think that is very realistic. Which brings me to my final point. We are emphasizing at the moment reporting on climate change. This is a central driver in the new multi-annual financial framework with a very ambitious target of at least 25%. We are putting all of our resources, and they are limited, into this. And I believe that whilst this is only a fraction of the SDG agenda, it is important, very concretely, on something that is measurable and to which we want to be held accountable, to make genuine progress that is going to give traction to reporting requirements. So for us, that is the key emphasis. And as I said, going forward, we want to look at how the readability and thereby the accountability within our existing framework can be strengthened to put more emphasis on a comprehensive overview of SDGs. That's the direction of travel right now. A new commission will have views about this. So I'm again very grateful for all this wonderful input from the Court of Auditors, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I've obviously asked loads of questions, but I'm sure you guys are keen to ask a few questions as well. Yes, starting with George, right at the very front. Do we have the mics?
Maybe I speak very loudly, very quickly. Very impressive presentations. One specific question to Gert-Jan Kottmann. In your focus on climate change and your dialogue with national governments, how do you raise the issue of subsidies for fossil fuel? Because in an era of transformation, leading by example is obviously important, and it's a very sensitive, big building block moving ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, now it works. The 25% target that we set basically aims at ensuring that the budget contributes quantitatively to the tune of more than 300 billion euros to reaching climate change objectives. So this is a very narrow but very precise objective, which we will monitor also when it comes to member states' programs, which, as I've explained, are very important. Now, what the question you ask goes beyond this. This is about member states' policy settings and environmentally unfriendly subsidies, to define it broadly. That's not so much covered as such by the budget, but we will need to ensure that where the budget intervenes, it does not intervene in support of such policies. Beyond that, we will need to work with member states through regulatory means and through policy recommendations to phase out such harmful subsidies.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, any questions? Hands up. Others, I will take my prerogative. I've got loads of questions to ask, but as you can tell, I can talk a lot. So I know we're having coffee soon, but it'll be good to get some questions. Well, I'll use my prerogative and I'll ask the questions. So how trust, as we know, or the lack of it, is a big issue. How do we make sure that we can ensure that the information that comes out is relevant? It's, and I'll put it both to the public and the public sector and the private sector. So starting with the private sector, because you guys have been quiet for a little while, give you a bit of chance to think about it. So how can you improve trust in terms of the quality of the information? I know we're talking about using the standards, but beyond that, what's your next steps? How are you going to further improve?
Well, from an organization that represents accountants and auditors, obviously our obvious answer would be, and it doesn't mean that we are calling for this to be regulated, but if you talk about trust, I'm sorry.
No, it's not you. I think
to speak. Then you talk about having an independent review of that, an independent level of assurance on that. And I think that's where we are not yet on European level. That is not mandated. But when we listen to the debate, when we hear investors, when we hear stakeholders, what they are looking for, we hear louder and louder a call that there is an independent eye that adds trust to the information that is published. Does that need to come from auditors, from other insurance providers? That's up to others. Thank you, but I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you, Hilda.
I chair the ICAS Sustainability Panel, so the Institute of Chartered Accountants Sustainability Panel. And one of the things we're really trying to do is move towards having accountants take accountability for more than the financials. And ultimately what we see is things that were 20 years ago considered, you know, not even on the horizon, like climate change, they're now being considered impacting the financials in the near to medium future. And a quote that I will share with you that I was passed on by somebody was somebody reading an annual report, a lengthy annual report. I understand the first half. I'm not sure whether I can trust it. I trust the second half, but I'm not sure whether I understand it. And I thought that was a perfect summation of where we are at the moment in terms of the financial reporting, which is audited, but unless you have a reasonable understanding of what is presented in financial reporting, it's quite hard to make your way through that information. The first half, a lot more understandable, but is it credible? And SDG washing seems to be something that is taking over from greenwashing at the moment. So you pick the easy ones. Yes, I can talk about carbon emissions. Let's pick SDG 13 to report against. And so for me, this is an evolution in terms of both the reporting, but also the assurance of it. And we would very much welcome more assurance on the non-financial information because I think it is as critical as the financial information.
Okay, and
I'd just like to add a couple of points to that. So we do have our non-financial information audited specifically because of that, to make sure that what we're saying is credible to our audience, but also understandable. But I'd like to come back to the topic of materiality, which was brought up earlier today. Excuse me. And the importance of materiality in terms of stakeholder consultation and the development of new strategies for credibility purposes. Because there's the context and the time element related to how businesses operate, and the idea that you go to your stakeholders and really find, some people define it as value creators and value destroyers for a company, or areas of greatest impact potential, and incorporate that, sort of communicate about that to your stakeholders and in your reporting, but also incorporate that on how you develop your strategy moving forward, how you develop your performance indicators, and how you make your choices in terms of standards or cocktail of standards that you choose is really important for that credibility as well, because people, again, this engagement point is important for your audience. And on SDG washing, I'm just the last point, and I'll let you move on. I see you want to move on. I would love nothing more than to see a standard on SDG impact that companies could use to evaluate that. We have seen so many different kinds, and to come up with one of our own seems sort of disingenuous and perhaps overly boasty, and we're a historically relatively discreet company. So I'm right with you on there on the SDG washing and how sort of uncertain territory that is, and how much as a company we would welcome more consensus on that.
Okay, thank you. So the views from the private sector. What about the public sector? Starting with Eva.
I think the question here on standard is extremely important, like in any other business. And I mean, working with standards is also about power. It's also about business, and it's about money in the end. And I think there's really room for more of a global, coherent initiative right now. The second thing about assurance, I think that is very important to talk about, and I had the possibility to have a few round table discussions both in Luxembourg but also in the country I know best, in Stockholm, with, for example, representatives for the Big Four. And I think when it comes to the audit society, schizophrenic is maybe a strong word, but I think that many of the consultants firm, many of the audit firms see we can be helpful when it comes to produce the sustainability report, but giving assurance to this is very challenging, very difficult, because it's a matter of risk assessment, of course, and making an independent risk assessment, but it's also a question of materiality and sort of being prepared for different kind of crisis, and also being prepared what will be the value, not only of the consumers today, but of the consumers tomorrow. So I think there's a bit of a reluctance from some sort of audit firms, also including the public audit, to give assurance to not just what is in the report, but also to say that this is material, that is the most important things that is in the report, because then you also have to have an opinion on what's not in the report. So I think this is challenging. The directive which we talked about, from what I understand today, the auditor's role is to assure, yes, there is a sustainability report, and it has been some kind of a process. But in most countries, from my knowing, there's not assurance to the specific information, and not also assurance to what's not in there. So I think this is something that we really have to address. And of course, at the end of the day, it's also about liabilities.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well said. Nicola, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, actually, I totally agree with what Eva just said about the 2 points of standardization and also verification, if you want. And it comes to mind a recent, the launch of a recent initiative by the IFC, the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank, where the objective is to put together private and public investors. There are about 60 signatories, including the IB, and the vast majority being institutional investors, which agree on a set of 9 standards of what is impact investing. And one of the standards require annual verification. And I was there at the discussion on how to do that. There's a freedom to do it with the internal auditors, but everybody agrees that there's a need for an external verification, external auditors. So there is some work going on in that direction. Standardization is key. And the other thing, this is our personal experience at the IB, and I think all the institutions that report on projects, is the data quality. We have a lot of indicators, but they lack a lot of data. The World Bank itself said that 2/3 of the data are not available. So we need to work a lot on that.
Absolutely, thank you. And Mr. Koopman, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just very briefly, I think for public sector reporting and assurance, we have a lot of work to do still. That is obvious. But I think the type of conversation we're having today, the type of reports the court is producing, I think that in and of itself is very important to move the cursor and to move the debate forward.
So just to sum up, just one, if you have a panel of experts in front of you, if you could share one piece of advice for Mr. Koopman to take forward, what would it be? Very quickly, in about 3 words, if you can say 3 key words. I'm going to pass on, sorry, Sarah Jane, starting with you first.
Okay. Start doing something.
Regular stakeholder consultation for me.
I would have said action.
Action, yeah. Is there anything, Eva, you want to say? Obviously, we need a strategy, but is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think we highlighted the challenges in our report, and I think, one has to admit, it is complicated. It is complicated, especially with the shared management, also together with the member states. But we shouldn't give in.
And Nicola, finally, is there anything you
One thing that comes to mind is that we need to solve issues of confidentiality when we're sharing this information. A lot of these data are confidential, so how do we represent them?
Yes.
It's a challenge.
Indeed. And I would just like to add, I know with public sector it's very difficult. With the private sector there's different responsibilities and focus in terms of long and short term, but certainly thinking about public sector, maybe SDGs is a way to get through that mire of input to output to outcome. What are we here to do? I think it's, anyway, that's a personal view. So I'm conscious I have taken about 3 minutes of coffee time. We started a little bit late, so...
Sorry, we have a question.
We're stuck to time. Oh, we have a question. One question, sorry.
My apologies for delaying coffee any further. I'll be brief. My name is Shay O'Malley. I'm from the European Chemicals Agency based in Helsinki. And it's a comment really, and it relates to Mr. Koopman's comment on the 25% commitment with regard to climate change. Obviously for us in the Chemicals Agency, sustainability is a key part, it's a core part of our business. And I think for organisations such as ourselves, if that commitment, as mentioned, could be reflected in the future MFF funding discussions, I think that would be a further sign of the prioritisation and commitment of the Commission to this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry. Okay then. Is there any last call before I... or you're desperate for your coffees? I think we're desperate for our coffees. So to say... But we can carry on the dialogues throughout coffee break, throughout lunchtime, do network. But please join me in the usual way to thank our brilliant panelists for sharing their expertise and showcasing what the challenges are. So thank you very much. So coffee should be outside. Please be back by 11:30.